everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Rambling Through Everyday Life with Fran and Angela. My name is Fran. I am one of the co-hosts for this podcast. This week, we are in for a treat. First of all, did everybody enjoy Thanksgiving? You know, that's just such a loaded question, isn't it? There's so many answers to be had to that question, but nonetheless, I do hope and pray that it was some time, some days to, reflect, consider, be thankful, yes. I don't know. I know that it's not what it all sometimes appears to be online, so I don't know. Whatever it was for you, I hope that the Lord was present and that He's teaching you things, revealing things to you. Anyway, okay, on to this week's show. This week, it is just myself interviewing the phenomenal Heather Thompson Day. Heather was on the show, on the podcast back in May. I think she was episode number 72, if you want to go back and listen to that. Yeah, she was episode number 72. It aired on May the 3rd. And we were talking about her book release at the time called It's Not Your Turn. It was one of those books where I thought, yep, needs to be mandatory reading. But she's got a new book out, y'all, and it's called I'll See You Tomorrow, Building Relational Resilience When You Want to Quit. I think your attention has been had, and I think you're going to want to order this book. And that's what we talk about today is this new book from our dear friend, Dr. Heather Thompson Day. If you don't know who Heather is, listen to me, we're on a first name basis. She's an interdenominational speaker. She contributes to Christianity Today and Newsweek. She also has her own podcast, which is called Viral Jesus. She's an associate professor of communication at Andrews University. I just love her. I wish that I could get her in a room and talk to her about all the things. She's so very thoughtful in her online conversations that she has. I appreciate that. I appreciate the fact that she's a strong female with a strong voice and considerate, thoughtful thoughts when it comes to the conversations that she has. There's a lot to learn from that. Anyway, enjoy the show. We are so thankful for you, and let us know, as always, what you think. Here we go, guys. Thank you, Dr. Heather Thompson Day, for joining us on this week's episode of Rambling Through Everyday Life with Fran and Angela. Okay, everybody, this is such a treat. I have been a big fan of Heather Thompson Day, Dr. Heather Thompson Day, for so long. I wish that I could go back and find a way to see when I first found your voice. I know that it was on social media. I'm just always appreciative for the fact that I love a good, strong female voice that's kind and generous, that's thoughtful, that's informative, that's not defensive, that's just can be gentle in a world of so much coming at us. So it's a real treat to have you back on Rambling Through Everyday Life with Fran and Angela. For another episode. Angela, I told you before we hit record, for crying out loud, she chose Disney World. She chose Disney World for the love of all things. So that's where she is.
Well, today. She is missed. We miss you, Angela.
And we do miss her. Okay, we're going to jump right on in. Heather, tell the people what you want us to know about you before we talk about this new book that you've written.
Yeah. So I think something that fits with why I wanted to write this book is that I've spent the last decade studying communication, over a decade. And the communication is always seen as the vehicle by which we experience all of our relationships. And so I've always been really passionate about helping my students understand what tools are available to them to better navigate this thing that we call relationship, because there's a direct link, and this is research, there's a direct link between the quality of your relationships and the quality of your life. And I'm of the belief, this might be my dying optimism. I am an optimist, but I just believe that most of us are doing the best we can with the tools we have.
Right.
And so I don't think it's that we need less relationship. I think we need better tools. And my background being in communication is why I just felt like, how do we, at least from my perspective, give better communication tools to how we can navigate our relationships and hopefully have a higher quality of life.
Right. I could not agree more. I said to some students, I'll refresh your memory, or maybe say for the first time, I work on a college campus and I have access to a lot of college students. And we were in the middle of doing some one-on-ones, just some check-ins, some checkups. And I told them, and you're speaking into this because communication is interesting. And I think the art of using your mouth and words face to face is something we really have to fight for.
Yeah.
It's easy to shoot a quick text. It's easy to post our thoughts on social media. But these real live conversations that need to occur, if we do not fight for this and keep equipping and teaching not just students, but everybody how to do this in a healthy way, then I really do fear for the future and the ability or inability to talk through these harder situations. And guess what? I think you've written a whole book about how to hang in there.
I hope
how to
so.
hang in there. And I love the fact that you are an optimist. The name of this this book, and I believe it came out in September, is called "I'll See You Tomorrow." Now, when I look at this title and put it side by side of the previous book that I've read, I know you've written others, but I was a huge fan of "It's Not Your Turn." Huge fan. Wanted it to be mandatory reading. Wanted it to be something that everybody read and talked about, discussed in small groups. So you put these two books beside one another, and I feel like you're continuing. You can tell that this is important to you. You're teaching us that it matters to keep showing up for people when things are difficult.
Yeah. I think "It's Not Your Turn" was about, like, how do I keep showing up for myself? And "I'll See You Tomorrow" is about showing up for others. However, I will say, I don't think we're able to show up for ourselves unless we have people showing up for us. It's this circular experience because you're wired to live in relationship with other people. Yet it's the first thing we want to cut off when things feel stressful.
Yeah. Everybody raise your hand if you feel stressed. Okay. All right. So why this book? Where were you? Take us back was this a couple of years ago? What was happening in your life that made you think, you know what, we've got to keep talking about how to show up, like you said, for others when this thing is getting hard, and it's getting harder and harder by the day.
Yeah. So I was living in Denver and we had just moved there. And the transition was more difficult than I anticipated. And I think a lot of it had to do with, which I talk about in chapter 3, it's very hard to make old friends, right? It's almost impossible to make old friends. And so I was experiencing all this transition in my life. And at the same time, then COVID happens right after we move. And so I'm watching The Last Dance, the Michael Jordan documentary of the Bulls on Netflix. And there's this point in The Last Dance where, and it's before the Bulls became the Bulls. They finally make it to the playoffs, which is a big deal for them, that you start to see some momentum with the team. And then they're playing against Orlando Magic and they lose. And so everybody is feeling really defeated and they start walking off the court because they're done now. You're done for the season. Go home, go on vacation, rest. And the trainer turns to Michael Jordan and he says, and I looked at him and I just said, hey, let me know when I'll see you. Meaning, let me know, take a few months, whatever. Let me know when you're going to want to be back. And Michael Jordan says to him, I'll see you tomorrow. And the idea is that the reason Michael Jordan is because when everybody else went home, he always went back to the gym. He didn't see it as a finite game. Yeah. He saw basketball as an infinite sport. Right. And I may have been down in one game, but that doesn't mean I'll be down in the next season. And so I'm going to show up season by season by season. And so we took that, my husband and I took that and said, what if we applied this to our relationships with people? And what if we applied this to our own lives? What if we are actually eternal beings? Who are simply living this one human experience?
Why do you think it is? You talk a little bit about vulnerability, and it's hard. It's hard nowadays to put it out there and to expose yourself, to be honest, to show where you may be weak, where you failed. You're not, even within your own family, it can be difficult within your own friend group because you're not real sure how people are going to respond to this honesty, to this concern, to this weakness, to this situation where you just want to throw in the towel. What is it about right now? Or what's different about 2022 that maybe we didn't see? I can tell you 5 years ago, I was not afraid to put my thoughts out there. I'm more afraid of, I feel like too, let me say this. I feel like if we're afraid to be vulnerable, we're going to lose our voice. We're going to lose the ability to, yes, have the conversation that we said earlier, but being honest and vulnerable, we're afraid maybe that people are going to respond in a way of maybe just not understanding, or it just be flat out ugly.
Right. I think one of the things that's different about this season in comparison to last season is the research says that 3 out of 5 Americans are exhausted. 3 out of 5 Americans say, I feel more exhausted today than I have felt in my entire life. Mm. And so the proposition that I make is that I don't think it's that relationships are draining. I think we're entering relationships drained. And so whenever, everybody knows this, when you're tired and hungry, right?
Yes.
Whenever I'm tired and hungry, I will say things I wouldn't usually say. I will act in ways I wouldn't usually act. Right. And it's a lot harder for me to control those emotional impulses. Mm-hmm. And I just think that that's like the collective state of where we're at. And my concern, however, man, I'm really concerned. Mm-hmm. One, because literally, like, as Christians, there's a higher call. Like, God himself does not exist outside of the Trinity.
Right.
God himself does not exist outside of relationship. And yet we think we're going to be able to navigate this thing outside of relationship. It's right. Especially when we're called to be image bearers of God, which means I am called to live a relational life.
Right.
Right. And I'm concerned because literally this is Bible. This is Jesus who says, oh, you love those who love you. Mm-hmm. What good is that to you? Even a pagan will do that.
Right.
I really am afraid of this self-righteous addiction that we all have to our own rightness.
Yeah.
That we've lost the ability to even remember who, at least for myself, I won't speak for everyone, to even remember who Heather was 5 years ago.
That's right.
And how do I respond to who Heather was 5 years ago today as who I am today with empathy? Right? Because I was doing the best I could with the tools I had.
That's right.
And the more I lived and the more people I met and the more experiences I had, through time, and I hope through the Holy Spirit, I've changed.
Right.
And so how do we create spaces where people are able to continue and change?
That's the hard part, Heather, because we want to judge their change.
Yeah.
We want to be critical of their change or not change. And so it does. This is all very deeply rooted in theology and just basic. Even if you're listening to this podcast and you're not a believer, I'm going to bet money that you have heard along the way, love God and love your neighbor. Mm-hmm. And we are just missing the loving God, and we're missing the loving our neighbor because we're just so wrapped up in ourselves, whether that's an unhealthy self, or if we would even consider ourselves healthy, we're just so focused on ourselves, and we're not letting God be God. We're not Jesus Jr. We are not meant to not love people. But this is just where it gets tricky and hard. Okay, you talk about, I'm concerned too. I am very concerned. You talk about I love these two words together, weak ties, this casual connection, and how these weak ties can be just as important as strong ties. And one, we don't need to minimize weak ties. Explain to us what weak ties are and why are they so important? How can we be on the lookout and pay attention and tend to these weak ties a little bit better than maybe we are?
Yeah. So something I hear from my students a lot is I don't have a best friend.
Yeah.
What do I do if I don't have a best friend? My life is not going to be whole until I have a best friend. And I would like to take the pressure off that because it's not backed by the research. The research says your weak ties are actually more valuable to your well-being than even your strong ones, which I've gotten quite a bit of resistance from people on, but I don't think I think when we actually think of it in terms of it is not shocking to think that if I'm a part of a church community or a dance group or CrossFit, that I am healthier and happier. What is that?
Right.
That's a weak tie community.
Right.
It's people who, when I go in, I have a quantity of people who know who I am, who ask how my week has been, who are engaging with me on whatever it is topic. And so therefore I feel more safe. So an example I give with my students is, like, maybe you don't have a best friend, but when you walk across campus, you have 15 people or 5 people who say, hey, how are you? How are you feeling? Fran, I haven't seen you in a while. How's class? Whatever. If that happens as I walk across campus, I will start to feel like this is my campus.
That's right.
Even if I don't have a best friend on the campus, I'll feel like, well, people know me here. People care about me here. Those are your weak ties. Weak ties are simply weaker relational intimacy ties, meaning I'm not telling you about my divorce. Right. But I'm talking to you and we have a friendly relationship. I would characterize a lot of them as sometimes our friends on the internet.
Right.
Which is why I'm actually against shutting down all of our social media. For some people, social media is incredibly important because it's their exposure to their weak tie network.
Right.
So the research shows that you are healthier and happier, not just by quality, but also by quantity. That essentially relationship itself matters. And if I don't have a best friend, how do I still invest in the people at my work or in my classroom where I feel like I am still relationally connected? There are people who recognize me and who I recognize and who I am having communication with.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. I mean, let's just state the obvious here that the only reason why we're left on this earth is because of people. And so whether you classify them as strong or weak, people want to be seen, whether that's just a simple hello or an in-depth conversation or a meeting, or you're part of that community or that group, or they are your best friend. People want to be seen. When you're seen and heard, even through the simple exchange of a hello, how are you? I don't know the scientific research behind it, but I have to believe just internally that just matters to us. And so I don't know, maybe I understand the concept of weak ties and this casual connection, but everybody's tied together in some form or fashion, and it all matters. One is not necessarily better than the other. We need it all.
Yes.
Okay, let's talk about this other term that I love. And I think everybody's going to go, because I'm honestly just coming out of a season where I wanted to just shut down. I wanted to shut down and burn the thing down.
Yeah.
Like all the things. So talk to us about what you mean by shut down and why this is so important to understand, and how do we recognize in ourselves this concept of shutting down?
Yeah, I cannot overemphasize the fact that of both evolutionary biology and Christianity, you are wired to exist in relationship with other people. This is science. This is biology. This is physiology. You need relationship in order to survive. Here's an example. When we look at our lives and we say, I have a good life. I just need to make more money, but I have a good life. I have a good life. I just need to go back to school, but I have a good life. I have a good life. I just need to meet a partner, but I have a good life. When we say things like that, what we are really saying, this is from Brene Brown's research, what we are really saying is, I have relationships with other people.
That's right.
Can you hear my phone ringing?
No.
You don't hear that?
No.
Okay. I have
Did
relationships.
we answer it?
I nobody ever calls my office phone, so I'm very thrown off by that. But I have relationships with other people. When we look at our lives and we say, I can't do this anymore. I don't know how to get out of bed anymore. I don't know how to show up to my own life anymore. What we are really saying is, I don't have anyone.
Right.
I don't have anyone who I feel like genuinely knows me.
Right.
Because what makes us feel alive and at peace and fulfilled is actually our relationships with other people. So shutdown is what happens when we experience prolonged stress. A response to that, because it's overwhelming to my system, my brain can just say, okay, I'm going to protect you. So we're going to batten down the hatches and we're just going to shut down. So for me, what this looks like is watching 5 episodes of Survivor back to back.
Yes.
Right? And what I'm trying to do is I'm going numb.
Yeah.
Or it looks like scrolling on my phone.
Right.
And I had this conversation with my therapist, and she said to me, like, okay, so, what do you do for self-care? And I was like, oh, well, I'll just take a day and, I'll just watch an entire season of a show back to back. And that's my self-care. And she goes, and does that make you feel better or worse after? And I said, it makes me feel worse after. And she said, so that's not self-care. Self-care is things that make you feel better when you're done with it. So maybe watching 2 shows and then getting some work done, or going on a run, or going on a walk, like, would that make you feel better or worse? And I was like, oh my goodness, I've been doing this entire thing wrong. So our response to stress is to want to shut down, numb out. But the fascinating thing about the research, and if you read I'll See You Tomorrow, it breaks all of this down. I think it's in chapter 7, is that the very thing that can get us out of being shut down, that can get us out of that free state, that can get us out of being numb, is the thing that we think we least need, which is relationships. So here's a scenario. I'm exhausted, because 3 out of 5 of us are more exhausted now than we've ever been. And so after work, people say, hey, you want to go out and have a drink, or you want to go get dinner? And I say, no, because I just want to go home and watch Netflix, right? Because that's what's going to make me feel good. So I think, but actually what would make you feel good is to go out to dinner and have relationship connection. So choosing that, what's fascinating is you'll actually have more energy.
Right.
Everybody has had like one afternoon or one Friday night where you spend time with people who really love you and get you. And all of a sudden you're like, I can live my life again.
Right.
1-2 hours with people who care about you, because you're wired for it. You are wired to exist in relationship with other people.
Right. Oh, I know. And it's just this interesting tension that we're living in every single day. And every day, in every situation, we have to choose how we are going to respond to life and what's happening in that stress. And again, it all sounds great in theory, but at the end of the day, at the end of a season, at the end of a year, I think, yes, we're all so stressed, but clearly it's because we're not taking care of ourselves and the relationships. We're not being honest. We're not opening up. Netflix is a blessing and a curse. And we all know, I'm the same way. Right now, I'm getting all caught up on The Crown. I absolutely love The Crown. And I'm binge watching it because I'm trying to get caught up. But I also, at the very same time, recognizing, hello, there are people in my house that probably, need time and attention and conversation. So, we know the things, Heather. We do know these things.
Listen. If only we could close that gap between what we know and what we do.
Goodness gracious alive, Jesus, help us. Okay, let's talk a little bit too about this. I find this so fascinating, and this is not anything new, but I know it struck a little bit of a nerve with me because of just other things going on in my life. But so this idea, this word called forgiveness. It is a part of our faith. It is. It's key. It's love and forgiveness. I don't know. Those two they're just foundational in who we are as believers. But we struggle with this. So when it comes to relationships and however they're fractured, I mean, we all know you can be living with people or in close relationship with people, and it looks, or it's okay on the surface, or there's maybe no depth there, or we're just fearful to have harder conversations. But let's say you step in and you start opening up and you have these harder conversations because you want to be healthy. You want to move into a space of good health. It doesn't just accidentally occur, and it's not just going to happen because you prayed for it to happen. I mean, yes, pray for that, but it's going to take some hard work and some effort and that vulnerability. So when you get to that place where you're choosing to forgive, and I'm not talking necessarily about, oh, I've got to forgive some act that you did, or I mean, it's just simple daily behaviors, or you disappointed me, or I'm frustrated with you, because if we don't bring that stuff to the surface, then we're not able to forgive. So we struggle with this. Here's where it gets so very hard, swinging into a little bit more of an intense direction, is where you're called to forgive in relationships, but maybe you don't want to forgive, or you don't think that deserves forgiveness because of what all has taken place, whether it took place yesterday or it took place 40 years ago, and you're just now coming to terms with it. How do we forgive, Heather? How do we forgive?
Yeah. So my husband wrote that chapter, and I try not to speak on it that much just because his story, my husband has experienced a lot more, not only unmet relationship expectations, but actually abuse, situations that is almost humanly impossible to be able to forgive somebody in. And I'm really into self-compassion, and I want to make space for that. And I think we need to make space for compassion toward ourselves.
Right.
So what is forgiveness? Is kind of the question, because I think sometimes we hear the word forgiveness and we think it means a restoration to the relationship.
Right.
I don't even think that's biblical. I think we have biblical evidence where that doesn't happen. Right. But how do we give people back to God and restore us to ourselves? I think that's the better question.
Yes.
How do you, and that's not going to happen overnight.
Right.
Right. So it looks like going to therapy.
Right.
It looks like rehashing that same conversation with somebody who cares about you over and over and over again, because you just got to get it out.
Right.
Right. I think making compassion for ourselves to kind of go on that journey. And Tarana Burke, she's the founder of the Me Too movement. Something I saw her speak at Notre Dame campus once, and she just said, on your journey toward healing, everyone can't come.
Oh, wow.
And that was so powerful and so important, I think, for a lot of people to hear, because my fear with the word forgiveness is that sometimes it's been weaponized, especially in the church, where we re-victimize victims, right? And shame them for like being genuinely hurt,
right,
or having a difficult time getting over something. What if we don't have to do that?
Right.
What if we have to figure out, how do I restore me to myself? I will say this, the research, putting on the research hat now, the research says, the more you've experienced forgiveness, the more likely you are to forgive somebody else.
Yeah.
So it's kind of fascinating how forgiveness is what creates a world with more forgiveness.
Right. Well, and because it's centered around love, and it's a love for healing of yourself.
Yes.
And that's, I had my therapist say to me, oh, it's been several years, but I've never forgotten it, is you've got to be kind to yourself through this process, because any kind of wounding, any kind of hurt, any kind of process of healing, there's just pain involved. And it's not a one and done type thing. And a lot of times there are people involved in your pain, in your suffering that don't know. Maybe they don't even know that they're the ones that brought you pain. And so when there's people involved, it just gets messy. It gets complicated from a love side of things, from a forgiveness side of things. But as believers, we know what it's like to be loved by God. We know what forgiveness is like. We cannot forget those two things, or we're not going to be in relationship well with ourselves and with other people.
Right.
Okay. Last thing. This is so much fun, Heather. I love this. This is, you speak into the promise of God's ability to build. I love, because I too am an optimist, and I just believe he is constantly at work. And even when it looks like everything is falling apart, no, he's just rebuilding. He's building or he's rebuilding. He's doing something new every time, whether it's from literally nothing, or he's just recreating and refashioning. So there's this constant state of construction that's taking place. And what a beautiful, powerful thing when logically our minds, we could look at the world and just say, no, it is all burning down to the ground. No, it's not. Sometimes things need to come crumbling down so that there can be this rebuilding and this reconstruction going on. And I just love that. That gives me hope. I'm not discouraged. I cannot stay in a state of discouragement when I look at the world, because Scripture tells us that hope is what anchors our soul. We are called, no matter what state a relationship is in, or relationships and community are in, we are called to just remind people that it is hope, our hope in Christ and what we know about him and who he is. That's what anchors our soul in the midst of fear and uncertainty, and those overwhelming seasons of anxiety and exhaustion. So this concept of new houses on old foundations, that's like my new favorite little tagline phrase.
Yeah.
What do you mean by new houses on old foundations?
Yeah. So there's a lot of backstory to that, but I was looking for a house. I feel like it might have been last time I was on your podcast. We were in the middle of our house hunt since we moved back to Michigan, and put in offers on like 5 houses. And each time, I'm like, this is the reason why we didn't get the other ones. And it would fall through. And I was praying this through with my friend Annie F. Downs, and I had felt very strongly, I won't get into all the specifics, but I just felt really strongly that I woke up one morning, I felt like the Holy Spirit was confirming for me that I was going to find my house that day. And this has been, we've been living in my parents' basement for 6 months, a family of 5. It was and writing this book, I'll see you tomorrow at the same time. It was a very difficult time. And Annie says to me, Heather, I'm seeing an old foundation, but a new house. Is there anything that you've seen that looks like that? And I had seen a house, but we didn't get it. We put an offer in and we didn't get it. And so she was like, send it to me. I sent it to her, and she was like, I really think this is the house. And so praying it through, long story short, I had said to my husband, I'm going to dinner tonight. I'm making a steak dinner reservation. You don't have to come if you don't want to, because I know that this is wild. But if you want to come, you can come. But I am celebrating tonight that God is giving us a house. And so we go to dinner. I've ordered my food. Nothing has happened other than this text that I've had from Annie. And I'm like, well, that house fell through. As we're sitting at dinner, I get a text from my mortgage broker that said interest rates had dropped. And she thought if we reoffered, she had fixed some numbers around. If we reoffered, we were going to get the offer. I text my realtor. Long story short, that is the house that we live in today. And so I put this sign. It's an old house that needed so much work. My husband's first trade was a carpenter, and so he's still working on this house, but it's beautiful. And so I put a sign that goes up into my sunroom that says old foundation, new house. And as my husband, he actually wrote this chapter, but as he's getting into the work, so we get the house, yay. Well, now we have to fix it. right? Now he's lifting up floorboards and finding out that things are rotten underneath, and so much money, like just the amount of work that this house has been was far exceeding anything that we would have ever signed up for had we known. At the end of the day, he's a very talented man, and the house is not done, but it's really beautiful and it's special. And I kept praying the whole time as I was praying for a house, God, give me something that every time I get on my knees in it, I'm strengthened. Like just by the very place that I'm in. And I feel like it is that in my life. And it's just something my husband and I have said to each other ever since we hung up that sign, is we are building a new house, but we still have this very real foundation of our past experiences.
Yeah.
That's what our relationships are.
Yeah.
Right. And so we're trying to build something new, and we're trying to step into a future, but that doesn't mean that we're not lifting up a floorboard and finding out, oh man, like this is going to take some more work. This is going to take some more time. And so how do we make space for the Holy Spirit to continue the work in ourselves? Because he is building a new house, but he's using an old foundation.
Listen, honey, so many of us would rather just sit and watch that occur on HGTV.
Right.
Than actually do the daggum work. We would rather, we get that. That is one of my favorite analogies in all the world. But that's probably why, like on a spiritual side, why we love, so many shows within HGTV, because there's something beautiful. There's something beautiful happening there. And we resonate with that as people. But again, I will say it all the live long day. When the rubber meets the relational, daily, hard work, life road, I don't want you ripping up my floorboard. I don't. I'd rather you just paint it and cover up the wall with some
right. And that's what we do. But what if people are falling through?
That's right.
Right.
That's right. Oh, this is so beautiful. Something you said, I love this. I love that you included this in the book. It's you wrote, in Selma in 1965, Martin Luther King Jr. said, we must keep going. And we too must keep walking toward tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
Heather, we've got to keep walking. We've got to keep going. It is not all doom and gloom. It's not. There's hard work happening in all of our lives. We just want to not be afraid of it, step into it. I'll see you tomorrow encourages us in the most beautiful, real, non-scary, not intimidating kind of way that we can keep going. So that in these relationships that the Lord has blessed us with, whether they're up close and personal or a little bit farther away, so that we're showing up, that we are continuing to be a bright, hopeful light for this world. I love the title. Do you love the title still? My
husband and I say this it's something we say. I like titling books, actual phrases that I can use to remember something. Yeah. And I'll see you tomorrow. It really just means like, I'm her, or I'm frustrated, or there's an unmet expectation here, but I'm going to commit myself to the relational journey. Right. And so give me some space, but I'll see you tomorrow. I'm going to keep showing up to my own life.
It's my favorite. Thank you. It's my favorite book title. Okay, so everybody can find this book where? Where would you like to send people to order?
Anywhere. You can get it anywhere. I have links, obviously, on my website, heatherthompsonday.com. You can get it on Amazon. If you hate Amazon, you can get it at one of the smaller bookstores. You can get it wherever books are sold.
Okay. Oh, this is so fun. Thank you. Listen, honey. Sister,
thank you for having me.
Please, as a communications person, your voice so matters to this world, whether it's through books, whether it's through social media, whether it's in your classroom. I encourage you to live out what you have written.
Thank you.
And just keep going. We are all so much better and blessed because of you. So thank you very much. You keep walking, sister. Keep walking.
Thank you, Fran.
All right, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us for another episode of Rambling Through Everyday Life with Fran and Angela. Angela, we'll see you next time. Y'all have a great day. We love you so much.
Man, oh man, oh man, wasn't that good? I love me a good, strong, encouraging, challenging word. Puts a little fire in our bones, y'all. we can get out there and do the good, hard work that the Lord asks us to do. Okay, we love you guys so much. Enjoy your week. Please know that we're praying for you, and we will see you next time on Rambling Through Everyday Life with Fran and Angela. Have a great day, everybody.